Oh yeah, I saw that Neil deGrasse Tyson did a follow-up to Terrence Howard. Because if you guys missed it, that Terrence Howard video we did ended up popping off. It did surprisingly well. But dude, there are some wacky people that showed up in defense of Terrence Howard. They're like, well, actually, Luke, 1 × 1 = 2, as he says. You are just part of the scientific establishment that's doubting him and all. And it was like, bro, it blew my mind how many people there are hundreds and hundreds of comments from people that are like trying to defend him. It's wild. Yeah, did Neil deflower the flower of life? I don't think so.
A little backstory there. I took initial interest in Terrence because my mother said to me, do you know Terrence Howard? I said, yeah, I know. You mean the actor? She said, yeah. Well, I heard him interviewed on NPR. On there, he said that like when he was a kid, he wanted to be like a scientist and study the universe. I said, well, that's cool. Okay, maybe we'll get him on Star Talk. We love talking to celebrities who have a sort of soft geek underbelly. At the time, I didn't quite know how to get in touch with him, but we met at something called the Upfronts, which is where networks present their next season's TV shows.
I saw him at an event up front.
And then this came in my inbox. In this particular case, since I basically solicited it from him, I actually spent time reading every line of all 36 pages. And I commented. My comments are in red here.
So he actually went through and like responded to it. So the way Terrence Howard framed it is that, yeah, I went to Neil and I told him about my brilliant ideas. Because again, Terrence Howard, who thinks 1 × 1 = 2 for reasons, because he's deflowered the flower of life. He said that Neil like dismissed him and kind of implied that Neil was part of this like establishment that couldn't entertain new crazy ideas or anything. And then like here you can see that no, he entertained it, which is a professional courtesy for somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson to listen to anything you say should be a compliment. But for him to spend this time to actually read through it and type things out, and like that's pretty crazy. It's also funny that Terrence copyrighted his little paper. That's also kind of funny.
So I spent a lot of time on it, and I thought, out of respect for him, what I should do is give him my most informed critical analysis that I can. In my field, we call that a peer review. You come up with an idea, you present it either at a conference or you first write it up and you send it to your colleagues. It is their duty to alert you of things about your ideas that are either misguided or wrong, or there's the calculation that doesn't work out, or the logic doesn't comport. That's their job. Not all ideas will turn out to be correct. Most won't be. But to get to that point, you need to know things like, what has everyone else said about this same subject? Am I repeating someone else's work? Is this a new insight that no one else has had, but has foundations that are authentic or legitimate or objectively true? Am I making a false assumption? Am I making an assumption that someone else has already shown to be false? All of this goes on the frontier of science. Let me make it clear that I'm delighted when I see people with active minds trying to tackle the great unknowns in the universe.
This is the main takeaway I got from this video, is that he is so charitable with this and so nice about it. Whereas that video we watched last time of Professor Dave, where he's like, no, dumbass, 1 × 1 does not = 2, because that's insane. You learned this in elementary school, which you clearly flunked out of. Like, he is ruthless. Whereas Neil is like, I appreciate that you have this active mind and you're trying to find some clever new thing, but we're going to work through this together. You know, he's the patient teacher, whereas Professor Dave is the teacher that's like fed up with your BS.
It's a beautiful thing that people want to participate on this frontier. What can happen is, if you're a fan of a subject, let's say, a hobbyist, let's call it, it's possible to know enough about that subject to think you're right, but not enough about that subject to know that you're wrong. And so there's this sort of valley in there, a valley of false confidence. This has been studied by others, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the phenomenon.
The Dunning-Kruger effect, I've talked about this before as well. you see it all over life and existence. It's like once you've spotted it, you can't unsee it. But basically what you can think of it as is like the graph is kind of like if the y-axis is confidence. Okay, we'll just do and then this is experience, exp. Okay, how it generally works with the Dunning-Kruger effect is that people start like this, it shoots up and then it dips and ends up like that. And what that means is that if you have no exposure, no experience at all in a given field, you probably have no confidence in the subject. If I asked you just randomly like, hey, could you explain to me mortgage-backed securities in financial markets and how they led to the 2008 recession? If you had no experience with anything regarding finance, you'd have no idea what I'm talking about. Like, you would be like, I don't know. You'd have zero confidence in the topic. You'd be like, I don't know. But if you watch The Big Short, you watched a movie, you might think you have a little bit of know-how. You got a little bit of exposure. So you might be up here like, I can explain that. I've seen The Big Short. I can explain what happened. But as time goes by and you study it more, you buy a few books on it, you take a few classes, and then you have a professor who really understands it explaining it to you, you'll start to realize, oh God, I really don't understand this. I'm actually down here. Despite having studied way more than when I was so confident up here, I know what I don't know. And so my experience is increased, but my confidence in my knowledge has decreased because I know what I don't know. And it's the same thing with like flat earthers, where like flat earthers are right at the precipice of Mount Stupid. So like they are fully committed that they know everything there is to know and that you are shill and the earth is in fact flat, when in reality they're just incompetent. They don't know what they're talking about, but they really believe that they're here. Whereas if they took a few classes on like physics or on anything, they would slide down this valley and realize, oh, I don't actually know what I'm talking about. I'm actually not a super genius. And you hear this all the time where people like Terrence Howard, he says that he has figured out that Einstein was wrong. And he's done what no other mathematician or physicist was ever able to do. He's solved it. He really does believe that he is more experienced, has more know-how than Albert Einstein, who's over here. And Terrence, who is an actor that was in an okay TV show and one of the Iron Man movies, I don't think he even made it to the second one, did he? I don't think he even made it to the second one because he wanted to be paid more than Robert Downey Jr., probably because he did some of his Terrence math. But with this, it's just the more like as you gain experience, you start to understand what you don't know. And that makes you more humble. And then as you learn and you actually grow, you end up back at the top of Mount Wisdom and knowledge. But a lot of people start over here. And you even see, I saw it in like college and I was guilty of it too. You take one finance course and you're like, yeah, I know what's going on. I got it figured out, when you really, really don't. And you take more classes and you realize, oh, there's so much I don't know. So at the end of a 4-year degree, you come out of it and you're like, yeah, I really don't know much about finance. I took, a bunch of classes. I have a degree in it, but yeah, there's a lot I don't understand. Master's courses, you might end up like over here, and then PhD, you might end up over here. And then years of experience beyond that, you might finally become an expert, like a true expert. But the Dunning-Kruger effect is very, very real. And somebody like Terrence Howard is a prime example of that very phenomenon.
Phenomenon where a little bit of knowledge, you over-assess how much of that subject you actually know. And then when you learn even more, you realize, no, I didn't know as much as I thought I did. So then there's a sort of a lull there. And then when you learn even more, you come back up. Ultimately, learning enough to know whether you were right or wrong. To become an back up.
Yeah. Wisdom, knowledge, and experience. Confidence. Peak of Mount Stupid. Valley of despair. Slope of enlightenment. Plateau of sustainability.
Ultimately, learning enough to know whether you were right or wrong. To become an expert means you spend all this time. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't just sit in an armchair and say, I'm now an expert. It requires years and years of study, especially looking through journals where new ideas are published and contested. That's what we have learned is the most effective means of establishing that which is objectively true, or determining that which is objectively false. Both of those work hand in hand to move the needle on our understanding of the universe. I'm going to read you just my opening line here. It's titled 1 times 1 equals 2. So I lead
The disappointment in his face. 1 times 1 equals 2.
off by saying, this is an ambitious work that is a clear indication of a restless, active mind. Within these pages, however, there are many assumptions and statements that are underinformed, misinformed, or simply false, thereby compromising or nullifying many of the subsequent conclusions you have drawn. That's exactly what should happen in a peer review out of respect for one another's intellect. It opens with a quote from Terrence. It can never occur that...
So he quoted himself in his own article that he wrote trying to prove himself right. This like screams Michael Scott, you know, you miss every shot that you don't take by, I forget the name of the guy, you know, quoted by blah, 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 quoted by Michael Scott. It's the exact same vibe. He says it can never occur that a square root of a given number when added to itself is greater than the initial number squared. For that would expose a loose thread within the fabric of our understanding, a loose thread capable of unraveling the very ground rules of mathematics. The problem is that's just wrong. Like that's, no, that's not true at all.
The square root of a given...
Oh yeah, you miss every shot you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. It's the same vibe.
given number, when added to itself, is greater than the initial number squared. For that would expose a loose thread within the fabric of our understanding, a loose thread capable of unraveling the very ground rules of mathematics.
Dude, he's about to go so savage. Just wait. Because like that statement is flatly false. And it takes 3 seconds of thought to realize that it's false. Like, I am not good at math. And when I heard that, I was like, that is not true. What?
Statement. So then I just say, this opening thesis is false. There are plenty of examples of this that have escaped your attention. His statement is shown to be false for every number that's less than 1 and greater than 0. For example,
literally an infinite set of examples demonstrate that he is wrong. Because it's every number, every decimal, everything under 1 proves that it's false. There is an infinite number, an infinite set of examples for why he's wrong. That's how wrong he is. Okay. The square root of 0.64, well, I'll let him read it.
The square root of 0.64 is 0.8. 0.8 is bigger than 0.64. And it's a larger number than the original. And 0.64 squared equals 0.4096, a smaller number than the original. To the extent that the next 35 pages depends on your stated thesis, this fact undermines your claims and assumptions and conclusions. It's not about feelings here. It's about objective reality. So at the time, I considered Terrence a strong acquaintance.
But like, this is the thing is he countered that. And what did Terrence Howard do? Ignored it and said that like he's part of the establishment and he was just trying to like put him down. Says that he's like not willing to actually entertain his thoughts and stuff. It's like, no, you are flatly wrong. You are flatly wrong. Like if your whole argument is based on one premise that is demonstrably false, okay, your whole thing is like, what? It's just a waste of time now. Like it just doesn't work that way.
We hung out a bit and had much exchange. We haven't spoken much since then, but go to page 2 and in here, he mentions people who he declares were persecuted because their vision exceeded the myopic view of their contemporaries. And he mentions Walter Russell, Nikola Tesla, John Keeley, and many, many more. Regarding your list of people who have made brave sacrifices, I note that to be a genius is to be misunderstood, but to be misunderstood is not to be a genius. The work of Russell...
It's an important point. Just because everybody thinks that you're an idiot does not mean that you're actually a genius. just because sometimes they thought that, you know, in centuries past that geniuses might have been idiots because they thought outside the box. It's a dangerous assumption to make, to just be like, well, everybody says that I'm a dumbass, which must mean that I'm a genius.
Walter Russell, has eluded any experimental support, and the work of Keeley is generally not reproducible. Science is about reproducibility. I can have the most brilliant, crazy, fun idea ever, and if I perform an experiment and no one else can duplicate that experiment, it belongs in the trash heap. It's me in my own world, thinking I have landed on an objective truth, when in fact I haven't. That's how science works, the reproducibility of results. As for the work of Tesla, much of it had very real value to physics and our understanding of electromagnetism. And that value is duly recognized by my community in the naming of a unit of electromagnetism after him. You can't get more badass than having a unit named after you. Newton has a unit named after him. For example, the metric unit of force is a Newton. Much of the rest of his work was fringe and unrealized, either for violating known laws of physics or for being simply impractical. Just because you do some good stuff doesn't mean everything you ever did is going to be great.
There's also a lot of nutter butter people that think that Tesla was just like basically like a comic book supervillain, hero, anti-villain, whatever. So like one of the things Tesla thought was that you could probably harness energy in the ionosphere and basically have infinite energy available to you. But there was no clear way of ever capturing it, and it was just kind of like an idea. And now it's like, well, it's not practical. There's no way to capture that. Yes, there's a lot of energy, but it's like saying, you know, Tesla realized that the sun has effectively infinite energy, and we just have to capture that, and then all oil, every unit, you know, nuclear energy, all of that will be useless because we'll have harvested the power of the sun. And it's like, yeah, but like, how do we get there? Like, there's a pretty big leap between the idea and the execution. And Tesla had some cool ideas, but a lot of the time the execution wasn't kind of drawn out. There wasn't anything to demonstrate that his ideas on how to capture it or realize the ideas, none of those were fully realized or fleshed out. But a lot of people that like, you know, conspiratorial thinking are like, no, he did figure it out. It's just the establishment kept him down. The establishment stole his work and his papers that proved all of this real. That's why. It's like, or maybe he just had some really good ideas over here and then some bad ideas over here. Yeah. So like this, the PCR test. PCR means polymerase chain reactions. It's a test to detect genetic material from a specific organism, such as a virus. So PCR is also used to detect like parenthood and lineage. Like, you know, the "Are you the father?" tests. A lot of them, my understanding, use the same PCR testing technologies that were developed. But the guy that invented the PCR test is like total nutter butter. So he invented this amazing test that's been used in all sorts of fields, whether it's virus detection or genealogical stuff, well above my pay grade. But he's also like a total nutter butter conspiracy theorist, where he thinks like, I think he was one of the head honchos behind like the COVID is actually a conspiracy theory and doesn't actually exist, and AIDS is fake and all sorts of stuff. So just because somebody has a really good idea here doesn't mean that everything else they believe is true.
I will further affirm that just because an idea sounds crazy doesn't make it wrong. The system of research and publications in peer-reviewed journals has the capacity to spot crazy but true ideas, provided they're supporting by compelling arguments, and ultimately supported by experiments and observations. Newton's laws, Einstein's relativity, quantum physics were all revolutionary ideas that appeared in peer-review settings or journals. Meanwhile, most of the work of Russell and Keeley had no such success with their ideas. So I think on Rogan, Terrence said that I trashed those three researchers.
Attack that I had talked about Walter Russell and Victor Schauberger and John Keeley and Tesla as the people that I looked up to. So he threw shit on he was like, well, Tesla stuff worked, but Tesla was never really respected and out there.
When I'm just simply stating the fact, I don't think of that as trashing. I think of that as being honest. I mean, I could have softened it, but I don't think that's what people who care about you should do. People who care will be honest with you about ideas, about thoughts. The world is changing so quickly, and so is everything around us. Unfortunately, we have chosen to remain handcuffed to antiquated and obsolete beliefs. We have put an enormous amount of faith into the methods and practices of old that are as dead today as the men who propagated the notion that the world was flat. So I say here, regarding your world was flat reference, it's not widely appreciated that the idea of a flat Earth predates the introduction and development of the methods and tools of science as we practice them today. Those processes date back to around 1600, coincident with the invention of the microscope and telescope. Before then, truths were whatever seemed right to the senses. Afterwards, and to this day, truth was whatever the verified data obtained by your instruments forced you to believe if your senses otherwise contradicted the data. This fact means that there's no such misunderstanding on the scale of the flat Earth in the era of modern science. And in multiple places throughout the treatise, he's attaching a number to a physical idea or a physical object. That idea goes way back, by the way. Go back to Pythagoras, famous for the Pythagorean theorem, which we all learned in 8th grade, was it, or 9th grade? Pythagoras was also a philosopher who tried to understand how things worked. He felt, among others in his group, that if you assign a number to something, the number can imbue that object with certain meaning and significance, which means then if you manipulate the numbers, that you gain insight into the objects themselves once you've assigned a number to it. There's a lot of that permeates this document, but it's a long disproven approach to the world. Again, there's nothing wrong with a failed idea. Now other people know to not do it, right? That has value. If we place a candle in front of a mirror, the measurement of light is doubled, is it not? It does not measure as only one light source. We actually see two lights. A light meter will show twice the intensity of light. This is false.
He attacked it with such vitriol.
Maybe that's too blunt. What else should I say? I'm a scientist. That's what I would tell a colleague who then say, "Would thank you," and then we go out for a beer after, because that's how that works. And there's an old saying, I first heard it from Michael Dell of Dell Technologies. If one day you find yourself the smartest person in the room, change rooms. I say this is false. The light in the mirror appears dimmer than the source of light itself, for several reasons, starting with the fact that no mirror is 100% reflective. But more importantly, the candle in the mirror is always farther away from you than the candle itself. So the light meter will always read less than twice the actual value of the candle itself. I will note that from this work, Terrence,
when he made a bunch of shapes out of inflatable balloons, it's like, I invented a new geometry. Oh, cool.
produces art, sculptural art, which I find to be intriguing, even beautiful. To me, more intriguing than beautiful, because you got to look at it and you keep looking at it, like, what is that? And what's going on there? I just want to read you my ending comments here. I could not follow the reasoning on these last few pages, but the illustrations that derive from them are beautiful, regardless of how they were derived. My notes have been strongly critical of your reasoning and conclusions. I was candid and blunt out of respect for the energy you have clearly invested in this work. But if you're sure that you are still right and that I have completely misunderstood your thesis, then you will need to look for another person to evaluate what you have done and solicit their comments. In any case, like I say above, the images and illustrations in your final pages are beautiful works of art, unlike any I have seen. Best to you, Neil. So, in case people wanted to know what actually went down 8 years ago, just always be cautious of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You put in a little bit of work and you have an idea, and then you think your idea is right, and that Einstein is wrong, and Newton is wrong, and that everybody's wrong, and that all of modern astrophysicists are wrong. That's bold. That's bold. Audacious. Bodacious.
Remember what I said when I was like, he's so charitable with this. Like, you're a bold thinker. And then cut to Professor Dave. You dumbass. You know, it's like, what's more likely? That Einstein, Newton, every physicist in the world today is a moron who cannot appreciate your understanding that 1 × 1 actually equals 2. Or that you as an actor with no actual education don't know what you're talking about. Which is more likely? Like, it betrays the extreme, I would say, unearned confidence on the part of somebody like Terrence to believe that he has that secret knowledge and everybody else is just simply a hater or a doubter or part of some conspiracy. It's the same trap that, like, again, flat earthers will fall into, where it's like, hey, I work, like, no shade, but I work like picking up trash off the side of the highway as part of a community service thing from a DUI that this person had. And that's what I do for a living. But I watched some YouTube videos and now I'm convinced that I know more than all the scientists that have ever worked in astrophysics or anything. And everything is part of a grand conspiracy. The earth is actually flat. You can't actually go to space. It's actually a crystal dome over top. And I figured this out because I watched some YouTube videos. Like, you have to be so, like, your confidence versus your experience and actual education and knowledge has to be so out of whack that you end up sounding like totally delusional. And that's the same kind of thing with the Terrence Howard crowd as well. I've been very shocked at the sheer volume of people that have come out onto those videos, and like the video we did looking at the original video that he did. And it's like really depressing to see how many people are like, actually, I think he's a genius. You know, people mocked Einstein at first. I was like, I mean, not really. They didn't really mock him. They were just like, okay, we'll see if it's real. And then it turned out relativity was real, and it changed the world effectively. Like, that's just how it works, you know? My 14-year-old subscribes to the Lincoln was a tyrant theory thanks to YouTube. Oh, dude. Or the other one, my sister at one point, one of my sisters just casually threw out that she thought the sinking of the Titanic was all part of a conspiracy, and that the Titanic was actually swapped out for Olympic, and then Olympic was sunk because after the ramming with the I don't remember the ship that rammed her, but Olympic had like a permanent keel after she was rammed. So they were like, oh, they intentionally sunk her, and then they screwed up the insurance fraud and accidentally killed all those people in the sinking of the Olympic. So the ship at the bottom of the ocean is not actually Titanic, it's actually Olympic. It's like, okay, like you watched a TikTok of somebody that said that, you know, one of those like brain rot TikTokers. It's like, did you know that the Titanic was fake? And they talk in that really weird monotone way, you know? Drives me crazy. Dear God Almighty, it drives me crazy. Because somebody will watch a TikTok and then they'll just casually tell you, yeah, I think that the Titanic, you know, that's all fake. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's another civilization that built the pyramids, because I don't think that they could have done that. Because I watched a TikTok where a guy said that he didn't think they could do it. Like, people have stopped thinking. Like, just because you heard somebody say something doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. Just because I say, hey, I don't like the Creation Club stuff for Starfield, doesn't mean that you have to agree with me. You can be like, well, I actually like it for this reason. And I get what you're saying here, but what about this? And then we can go back and forth. Just like we were just doing that previous segment where I can go in and like, I say I don't like this. And you're like, well, but I like the ability to support modders. I'm like, I also like that. So if you're just buying Creation Club mods from non-BGS sources, that's cool. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. I still am frustrated that they take like 75% allegedly, but whatever. Yeah, Plague of Angel, genuinely disrespectful to say that these incredible achievements by ancient peoples couldn't stack rocks on their own. Yeah, it's the pyramid thing drives me crazy. The fact that people are like, no, it had to have been aliens. Like, no, they like, of course we don't have like a documentary crew that filmed the building of the pyramids, but people who know what they're talking about are pretty confident that they could have done it. It just would take 40 years of building with thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing it. Like the entire like city economy was built around building one of those things for 40 years. Took forever, but they would do it. Oh, golly. Aliens sunk the Titanic. It is funny when people are like, they hear anything that's kind of like a little baffling and like, aliens.